Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Rushcliffe series. This is the southernmost district in Nottinghamshire and it contains 59 civil parishes of England. And there's some corkers down here. Let's dive in and check one out. Welcome back to Rushcliffe again, everybody. Now today I brought you to a village that's probably one of the longest in Nottinghamshire. From end to end, it stretches for well over a mile. And that means in this episode, I'm going to be using a form of public transport to help me get around. Welcome to the village and the parish of Sutton Bonynton. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Sutton Bonington, South Farm and Buna's Farm. Welcome to one of the longest linear villages anywhere in the country. Sutton Bonington sits in the valley of the River Soar to the southwest of Nottingham. Despite being in Nottinghamshire, it's geographically closer to Loughborough, which is just 5 miles away to the south. Its connection with Loughborough is rather important, as we'll learn in this episode. Originally, Sutton and Bonington were two settlements, probably originating in Anglo-Saxon times. The names likely derive from South Farm and Buna's Farm. Sutton was to the south of Bonington, and it still is, but these days the two villages are united as one big continuous settlement. The two villages gradually grew together along the edge of the floodplain of the River Soar to make a long, narrow village which by 1340 was known as Sutton Bonynton. The two villages continue to have their own churches. An expanse of 20th century housing along Park Lane makes Sutton larger than Bonington these days. The dividing line between the two villages is Sutton Bonynton Hall, whose gardens and parkland create a gap in the built-up area. The total length of the village is 1.25 miles, and because of that, in this video I opted to use some public transport, rather vital for university students. Let's roll! Before we can get started on Sutton Bonynton, we first have to do some driving. Within the parish boundaries is the small hamlet of Zouch, which stands on the River Soar. It features Zouch Bridge that spans the Soar. It's known locally as the County Bridge, as it marks the boundary between Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire. Zouch is an example of a small canal settlement, though there was a mill here long before the Soar was made navigable. Due to the canalisation of the River Soar involving the construction of the Zouch Cut and several weirs and canals in the vicinity, the hamlet lies on several islands. These include a main island and the much smaller islands of Lower Home and Upper Home, which have small houses on them. It has amongst its landmarks a pub called the Rose and Crown, with one side of the pub on the main street and the other on the bank of the Zouch Cut Canal. This place has enough to be a video all on its own, but I don't determine the parish boundaries. After driving through Sutton Bonington village, we're in the northeastern corner of the parish. This is Landcroft Lane, a part of Sutton Bonington which often gets forgotten about because it's well out of the way. The same can be said for Melton Lane, which links Westleek with Rushcliffe-on-Soar via the Sutton Bonington campus. In the 1840s, the railway came to Sutton Bonington, and it's still around today. Later, we'll be walking over it. However, while we're still in the car, I can show you one of the two former stations that were close to Sutton Bonington. The one we're heading for here was Kegworth Station, which served not only Sutton Bonington, but also Kegworth and Kingston-on-Soar. The other one was Havant, which is just outside the parish in Normanton-on-Soar. Kegworth was opened in 1840 for the Midland Counties Railway. The station was built in typical MCR fashion, the main building positioned at a higher level and steps leading down onto the platform. It closed in 1968 and only the station house and the goods shed remain today. There had been local pressure to reopen it until East Midlands Parkway was built and opened in 2009. Until 1971, there was also a standard gauge mineral railway here between the main line and New Kingston gypsum mine. Sutton Bonington has always had quite an important link to the railways. Sir Cecil Paget, a notable locomotive engineer and railway administrator, was born in the village in 1874, and in 1923 he succeeded his father, Sir Ernest Paget, to become the second Baronet Paget of Sutton Bonington. There's even a type of locomotive, simply known as the Paget. A picture of one is on your screens now. He died in 1936 without children and was buried in the family plot at Malpit Hill Cemetery. The Paget family were the main owners in the parish for much of the 19th century, owning the two ancient manors of St Anne and St Michael. It was under the Pagets that the current St Anne's Manor House and Parkland were built in 1848. Now, where we've just been is to the north of Sutton Bonington, the very far north of the village. And what I've done is I've driven back to the south, close to Zouch. If you look at this junction here, you can see to the right there, Zouch is over there in the distance. So basically I've gone from the south to the north and back to the south again. Now the reason I've done that is because I'm about to catch a bus. You see, Sutton Bonington is a very, very long village, goes for quite a long way, and it was impossible to make a circular route out of this one because it really is the most linear of linear villages. However, there is a bus service which takes you from one end of the settlement to the other, and I'm going to use it, and it's important around here because a lot of people use it to get to a big landmark at the top of the village, which we'll see when we get off it. This bus stop can be found at the southern edge of Sutton, the larger of the two villages in Sutton Bonington. Here you can catch the number 866 bus, and that's what we're about to do. The village used to be served by a Skylink bus. It was a Trent Barton service which linked Loughborough to East Midlands Airport. When it was withdrawn, it left Sutton Bonington with no service until the number 866 came along, which began service in May of last year. Whilst waiting for the bus, I took the opportunity to tick off the parish thanks to the notice board on the wall of the bus shelter. The 866 is run by Notts Bus Connect. It operates from Monday to Saturday, and its primary purpose is to connect Loughborough to the Sutton Bonington campus of Nottingham University. It also runs through Zouch and the Leicestershire village of Havant. It's not a regular service in the sense that it only operates at peak times, twice in the morning and twice in the evening. It's a vital service for university students, but absolutely anyone can use it. The 866 services link up to the on-demand services that cover West Rushcliffe, and as a result, it gives the local people more choice as to when and how they can travel. A single journey costs £2, and given the length of the village, well over a mile, I thought that was pretty reasonable. The service has been praised greatly by local councillors and MPs. Councillor Neil Clark, the Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment at Nottinghamshire County Council, was quoted as saying, "I'm delighted that we've been able to set up this new service in such a short space of time. We realise how important the peak time journeys are for local commuters, students and the community. By looking at demand and linking up with existing bus services, we can provide people in Nottinghamshire with the transport they need while offering the best value for money." So enjoy this little ride past some of Sutton Bonington's landmarks on the 866. We'll be getting off again before you know it. Thanks, mate. So here we are then, just 8 minutes later outside the Sutton Bonington campus, and that's our next landmark. Dominating the northern part of the parish is the enormous Sutton Bonington campus. This was originally the Midland Agricultural and Dairy College, which formed in the first decades of the 20th century. The site was used as a prisoner of war camp during World War I, and in 1948 became part of the University of Nottingham. The campus has steadily grown over the decades with brand new buildings. The main part now runs to approximately 20 hectares in terms of size. There are plans to expand the college further. In 2008, a master plan was created which envisages future developments, mostly northwards towards Melton Lane. In 2006, the college gained the School of Veterinary Medicine and Science, and since 2011, it's also had the Bioenergy Centre, which is a research centre for international brewing company SAB Miller. The residential aspect of the campus is known as Bonington Halls. It consists of a number of spread out halls and houses. These are listed on this handy information board, and notice they're all named after Rushcliffe villages. We'll be seeing some of those in future episodes. Let's head towards the village now. This here is Sutton Bonynton Tennis Club, right on the junction between Marlpit Hill and Landcroft Lane. It has 4 all-weather floodlit courts designed for play all year round. The club has several teams in the county leagues. Right next to it is a bowls club. Sutton Bonington's other sports clubs are located further into the village, and we'll come across them later. All of this is within the shadow of the campus buildings along Landcroft Lane, and if you go towards the village, you'll find more buildings that are owned by it. This drive leads to St Michael's House, better known as St Michael's Flats. There are 4 blocks as well as 2 paddocks. The whole site covers 5.9 acres and it's currently on the market as a development opportunity for somewhere in the region of £1.5 million. On the other side of the road is a landmark that's often missed. It's a cemetery hidden away behind some huge hedgerows. As well as the Paget family plot, this churchyard extension for St Michael's also contains 2 Commonwealth war graves. Next, we cross a bridge over the Midland Main Line. This obviously is the same line which we walked under back in Kingston-on-Soar. As we already know, there were stations here, but neither no longer exist. Just over the line is a field which looks like it's full of earthworks. If these are indeed earthworks, I'm afraid I have no idea what they were. The field seems to belong to a farm located on the corner of Main Street as we begin to enter civilization. We're coming into Bonington, the northernmost of the 2 historic villages. Sutton and Bonington were originally 2 villages and separate townships before being united for civil purposes in 1829. Sutton and Bonington were also separate manors, named after their churches, St Anne and St Michael respectively. They became part of Leek Rural District until its abolition in 1935, when the parish transferred to Basford. The united village then became part of Rushcliffe when it was created in 1974. Bonington is the smaller of the 2 these days, but I reckon it has the much more interesting landmarks. Just off the main street we find the Anchor, Bonington's pub and a Marston's free house. It dates back to at least 1826, but it's likely older. This was owned and run historically by the Bollard family, who are remembered by way of the street this stands on, Bollard's Lane. It's a dead end, but there is a little path at the top which links it to Bucks Lane. I almost missed it, but on the next corner there's an old schoolhouse. The village has had at least 2. This was a free school built in 1719. A national school would replace it in 1844. Now, because Sutton Bonington used to be 2 villages, there's 2 churches. This is Bonington's, dedicated to St Michael. This is the much larger and taller of the 2. This makes sense because historically Bonington was the bigger settlement. This one is 13th century in origin. Services continued to be held in both churches, but the ecclesiastical parishes were merged in 1923. St Michael's has a peal of 6 bells. Originally it was 3, 2 of which still remain, cast by Henry Oldfield in his Nottingham foundry in 1579. Bonington's narrow main street reminded me of other historic Nottinghamshire villages we've met before. A lot of the buildings were once other things. Take this one for example. This is the former Old Boot Inn, which goes back to at least 1782. It closed in 1922. Next we have a white house with an overhang. This used to be a shop. It dates from the mid-17th century, making it one of the oldest in Bonington. Directly opposite this is Gallery 119, a shop that sells antiques, collectibles and furniture. It's also a cafe. A few steps later and you're met with this, a big open space. That's Parkland and it belongs to Sutton Bonynton Hall. This is a country house built mainly in the early 1700s. It's simply known locally as the Hall. In 1825 it came into the ownership of the Paget family and remained a residence until the year 2000. It's since gone into commercial use as a location for weddings, conferences and parties. The Hall and its parkland are situated in a gap in the village. It's this gap that still to this day forms the boundary between Bonington and Sutton. So now we're in Sutton, by far the bigger of the two villages these days. Our first job here is to head onto the local playing field. This features a big playground as well as being the home of Sutton Bonington's cricket club, founded in 1824. One of the newest additions to this area is a stone near the entrance. This is a memorial to all the local people who were lost as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and a tribute to the scientists and key workers as well. The granite was provided by Tarmac, whilst English Rose provided its plaque. Among the buildings here is the Scout and Guide Hut. Sutton Bonynton Football Club also play here too, and the field is also used as the location for the Sutton Bonynton show. Now we've come away from the field via a gate onto Pasture Lane, a dead-end road that runs to Diamond Wood on the bank of the Soar. At this end it has a local shop, and there's a second one as well further down Main Street. The end of this road also has a small garden with a tree and 3 benches. The middle one was placed here in 2000 to mark the millennium. Briefly, we turn back on ourselves to find a pub. This is the King's Head, which is the only pub in Sutton. With a prominent position on the main street, it's a 2-room building which dates back to at least 1855. Among other things, this is known for its traditional English high tea. Now we're heading into Rectory Close. Until recently, this was the newest residential area in the village. These houses stand on the former gardens of Sutton's Rectory, and when built, they added a significant number of new residences to the village. The rectory itself still stands. It's the huge building in the far northeastern corner of the street. We must be close to a church, and we are. From Rectory Close you can access St Anne's Church. This is Sutton's main religious building and it stands at the end of St Anne's Lane. It's smaller and older than St Michael's as it dates back to the 12th century. A notable feature inside is a 15th century alabaster effigy of a knight set in a recess. The church has a west-facing 19th century gable-end bellcote consisting of 2 arches, each with a bell. St Anne's House is at the end of the lane. It's a dog-friendly B&B and it's considered to be one of the prettiest houses in Sutton. If you continue down the road you'll find the equally attractive Village Hall. This is just over a century old, having been built in 1912. It was extended in the 1950s and again in the 1970s. It's by far the most important communal venue in Sutton Bonington. As well as being the hall, it also doubles as the local library and it can be hired out for as little as £10 an hour. After passing some more gorgeous brick properties, we're once again back to Main Street. Even with 2 Anglican churches, the nonconformists in the area still had their own buildings. The Wesleyans, the Primitives and the Reformed Wesleyans each had a chapel built here by 1881. This here is the former Wesleyan chapel, which was built in 1868. The next section of the walk is a simple trot down Main Street for a while and it's mostly residential. We're approaching what would have been Sutton's village centre. This has some lovely old houses, but I still prefer Bonington. What can I say? Personal opinion. This one was nice, a 3-storey ivy-covered effort not far away from a Baptist church which originated in Kegworth in 1794. Although its congregation declined in the 1960s, it still exists today thanks to a food science researcher and his wife at the University of Nottingham. Moving on, next is the second of the 2 local shops, and this one doubles as the post office. Not far away from this is the Old Plough Inn, dating back to 1683. It later moved to a new premises opposite and was renamed the Poacher's Arms. It closed in 2004. Main Street has now become Park Lane. At Hungary Lane, where it changes its name, we find the local school, Sutton Bonynton Primary. This is the only one in Sutton or Bonington these days. It was originally the National School, which was built in 1844, and it's still going strong today. Sutton doesn't have as many listed buildings as Bonington, but it still has some crackers. Number 6 and number 8 Park Lane both are, the former dating way back to the 13th century. This big house is Park Lane Farm, which oddly isn't one of the listed buildings. We're nearly back to where we began. This is the next bus stop along from the one we used at the start, and it's the local book exchange. Our last task is to explore briefly the much newer estate off Park Lane. Mainly 20th century bungalows, this greatly expanded Sutton as a village in the post-war years. It features the local surgery, which you might easily mistake for just another bungalow. As a result of this estate, Sutton is now the much bigger of the 2 historic villages. It was once much smaller. It's mad how time changes things. The estate isn't all that exciting, it's just rows and rows of residences, so I opted to jump back to Park Lane. This too was added to greatly in the 20th century. Beforehand, these southern areas of Sutton Bonynton were either swampy or agricultural, depending on how close they were to the River Soar. It's not long before we're passing the bus shelter where we started. It took me just over an hour to reach this point, not bad considering the length of the village. As we start to leave civilization, Zouch appears on the horizon over the fields. Job done. And as if Sutton Bonynton needs to get any longer than it already is, you can see behind me here, behind this house, there's some new houses which are going up. There's some flags there flying. There's some brand new houses being built over there, right at the southern edge of the village. So it is getting even bigger, even bigger. I'll tell you what, without that bus service, I'm not quite sure how I would have done this one, quite frankly, because this would have taken me at least 2 hours to walk around, going from here to the north to back again, somehow covering it all. No idea. Bus services are very, very useful in this country. I thought it would be a good idea, in fact, to include a bit of the new estate at the end of this video, so I did just that. I kept the camera on the dash as well for the start of the next one. Next week, we'll be having a look at a place that still has a ferry over the Soar, and a very unusual one at that too. See you all there. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.